me. And it definitely helps other people, because when I'm doing Akashic Record readings for people, I notice that the patterns that they have now, I can see patterns from images from other lives. And so when I see them in a certain dress or certain outfit or certain
Hmm.
scenery, and I repeat the pattern of what I see, and then they say, "Oh, that somebody else told me that," and also that's how they living now, unless it's brought to the surface.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm super excited once more. Today I'm talking with Adam Gell. Hi, Adam.
Hi, how are you? Nice
I'm
to be
good.
here.
Yes, thank you for being here. Adam interviewed me recently on his channel, which was a lot of fun. I'm like, I want to hear your story too, because you shared some things that really got me intrigued while we talked then. So, thank you. I'm honored that you're here with me and that you're talking with me on my channel.
Yes, I'm glad to be here to actually share my story as well. So, like-minded individuals with the capacity to go beyond and
Mhm.
look at things from a different perspective, and
Yeah.
understand that we're not just our bodies. You're a perfect example of that.
Totally. One thing I really enjoyed about our interview was that you you asked me and dove into questions that were beyond my near-death experience and just basic life spiritual type questions, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
encourage.
yeah. I think it's important to show, I think, the diversity. We're not just one experience, and we're
Yeah,
not just one story. We're more diverse than that story. And if we just live by a story and we're interviewed or we share that story, then we feel kind of like we're missing the full perspective of who we really are.
right.
And so
Yeah,
I
I
like to bring
appreciate
that
that.
out in everybody.
I do appreciate that. I'm going to read your bio now. Okay, just give your short bio.
Yep.
Okay. So Adam Gell is an Akashic Record consultant, shamanic guide toward healing and fulfillment, an embodiment of the masculine balance, a union of both the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang, the lightness and the darkness that exist in each and every one of us. It was through the Akashic Records and past life regressions where he learned that his present medical condition and his distaste for striped clothing was related to his time as a doctor in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. Wow. So Adam's website is adamgelluniversalhealing.com, and he does have a YouTube channel as well. And what is the name of your YouTube channel?
Yes, it's Conversations with Adam Gell and Inspiring Minds.
Okay. And I will have that down in the details. And also you created a documentary film called Forgotten.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to watch that. I apologize, I have not watched that yet, but I started it and it looks really good. Thank you. Thank you for putting that together.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what we just read, your history, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's interesting because for myself, I've always been interested in, I would say, my ancestry as a means of finding a support system that I didn't feel in my present life, in the life that I was leading as a child through my adolescent years. Uh, my interactions with my parents were weren't the best, and so I found the relationship with my grandmother, and I'd go to my grandmother's house. She would share stories with me. I would sit there and hear about her past life, not her past life, her life in the past, living, during the war years in Russia and in Europe, and traveling from country to country. And somehow or another, I felt very connected to that aspect of life, even though I was a 7-year old, 8-year old in Brooklyn, New York, growing up playing sports and growing up in a, rough neighborhood, so to speak. And so for me, going to my grandmother, there was a sense of peace and comfort, receiving her like attention that I didn't get in the house. So as I went through the years, that deep connection towards Europe really never left me. It was something that I was feeling connected to, and I didn't know what it was. Uh, as it happened, when I was working as a phys ed teacher, some 30, 40 years later, be in my gymnasium, and I remembered looking at the vents in my school building and getting like a panic attack from, or hyperventilating from looking at the vents that were above. And
Uh,
I would tell one of the students, I would tell the student, could you do me a favor? Could you just tell the custodian to shut the heat off? Because I would see the ribbon that was attached to the heat, and I knew it was on when it was blowing. And
mm,
something about that just made me nervous, and I had no clue or really recollection of what that happened, what it would have been. As it turned out, I had like asthmatic symptoms and feelings in the gym, as you know, there was both more a psychosomatic type of feeling, but it was also a reality as well. And so what I did was I went from doctor to doctor telling me about asthma and so on and so forth. And then one of my coworkers who I work with, she said, "Why don't you go to this person that I know?" And at the time, I was interested in acupressure, acupuncture myself. Years before that, in some type of holistic modality that I thought I could help myself with different aspects of healing. Uh, but what happened was the person told me to call this person up, and so I had no connection at all to, as I just said, it was mostly conventional medicine and dealing with things in that way. And I called up the person on the phone, and he said to me on the phone, "You have asthma," without me saying anything. And so naturally hearing that particular that dialogue between somebody who wasn't in my presence, I had no inclination of how a person was able to read me through the telephone at that point. So I visited the person, and after many sessions, we would start talking about my childhood and different aspects of how my energetic body was affected by different traumas and stresses in my life. And what happened was he told me, you could be doing the work that I'm doing, which at the time I couldn't label it as what he was doing other than Reiki master and other types of modalities. And during the sessions, in his presence, I would become very intuitive. Whatever he would show me a patient, I could diagnose the patient or look at the picture and say what they had or didn't have based upon being in his energy or presence.
mm,
Um, and then it led from him telling me while he was working on me energetically, he said, you were in the war. And I had no feeling of the war other than having been married in 1987 in Germany to a German woman and speaking German fluently within 5 months.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
and feeling at home in a place that from my ancestry would have told me differently. So as I visited Germany and I lived there, I would run into all different types of people who were in the war, soldiers from the war, and they would take a liking to me and I would take a liking to them. And it was almost like I was on the same wavelength as them, not chronologically, but emotionally, somewhat. So I left it. I had no idea of how that would impact me later on in terms of finding more information out. So as I was visiting this person, and he had mentioned to me what he told me about as a soldier, and then over time, as I opened up to the spirit realms and the connection to higher levels of consciousness, I came across the Akashic Records. And so I read books on the Akashic Records. I would learn how to open up my own records, do readings for myself. And at the time, I had a reading done by the person who I took a course with, and she did a reading for me and said I didn't tell her much about anything other than her opening up my records and seeing that I was in Germany during the war and that I was a doctor in the concentration camps.
Mm,
And interestingly enough, at work, people would call me Doc,
mm.
along with just, "What's up? How are you, Doc?" And I, I was looking at all the synchronicities as I put all two and two together with the past and the present. So I took that information and I kind of understood, and I said I had a distaste for striped clothing. Anytime I saw stripes or clothing going in a vertical manner, I would get nervous or uptight, and I couldn't if somebody wore it, or mostly myself trying to put that on, I could never wear a shirt like that. And that was another thing that I pieced together and didn't understand. So over time, I was able to do readings for myself, and I heard a name for myself, and I heard a mother and a sister, and that I came from Berlin.
Mm.
So I took this information and I tried to assimilate it in my life and help me digest a past feeling, a past life, and try to understand why it was coming up in the present moment of my life now and what I needed to understand about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great fear of doctors. So anytime I visited a doctor, I had a deep mistrust, like I wanted to run out of there.
Wow.
And so it was forcing me to face something that I didn't understand. As I continued, I did energy work for a client, and in the process of doing the energy work, after the session was over, in the middle of the session, the client got off the chair and said, "I remember you." And I said, "From where?" She said, "From the concentration camps."
Wow.
And that shook me completely because it was out of the blue, and it was out of nowhere in the midst of me doing what I was doing. So I said, and I knew she had read the Akashic Records herself. It was a reader, so I asked her if she can get some information within the next coming weeks, if she can get back to me. So she did, and she said, "You were born in Berlin, and you had a German mother and a Jewish father." And I got
Mm.
that information as well.
Mm.
And I took that information, feeling a sense of guilt, a sense of shame that I was experiencing from that, because I wasn't expecting to ask him for. I was normally was asking for information and receiving it. This was out of the blue, someone giving me information that I wasn't prepared, like an outside. I thought I'd have
Mm-hmm.
some control over what I was able to take in or not. And then I interviewed a husband and wife on my YouTube channel who have done past life regressions. And after the reading, they said, "Adam, I think there's somebody that will know you." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I'll have her contact you." So I get an email from a woman saying, "I was in Auschwitz. In my past life, I was in Auschwitz.
Wow.
And I remember you. You took me off the line and you saved me, and you helped me with a pregnancy." So in other words, she was pregnant and I helped her. I saved her from any further damage that might have taken place. And when I heard that, that was really the top of it. I felt so, I don't know what I felt. I felt overwhelmed, and I felt a
Yeah.
little bit obviously nervous from it. Uh, but in retrospect, and now looking at it, understanding it through my interpretation, I was able to say I'd like to do a regression, and I did a regression, and I saw myself there. I saw myself arriving, and I saw myself standing up to what something I didn't tolerate, didn't want to do, and I was eliminated, so to speak.
Mm.
And I was told that in the first reading as well, not why I was, but what happened. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt the sense of peace actually standing up for what I believed rather than going along with something that I didn't. Um, and so it impacted my life insofar as understanding the present, as I said before, understanding where I'm at now in my life and where I've come and what I've learned to understand, and the heaviness that I needed to remove from my body and from my energetic body to be able to have clarity and not be living in that past.
Yeah.
And I am very drawn to going to that 1940 era
Mm.
with a lot of things. My mind is in dress, in thought, my connection to my grandparents. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's a lot of
Yeah.
clarity for a past life. Yeah. Did you feel that there was some healing that needed to be done with it as well?
Well, talking about it now, you're living in the moment of that when just I'm speaking in that energy. So
Yeah.
when I'm not in this moment, I definitely did a lot of healing because I was able to understand a lot of things about the fear of doctors,
Okay.
the fear of
Right.
why I couldn't breathe, uh, the clothing itself, the language, my connection to being married to someone who I was probably more attached to connect myself to the past as opposed to having a relationship to move forward. It
Right.
was somebody that was a bridge to the past as opposed to the bridge to the future for me. And
Oh,
so
yeah. That's
all these connect. Yeah.
that's a lot of clarity. I love that because I work with past lives too. And I don't know if I mentioned that with you, but and you probably wouldn't remember, but
Yeah, I do. I do.
okay, yeah. And so that's there's just so many layers, right? Just so many layers of another life experience that we bring forward that needs to help us move forward. I hadn't heard it put quite that way though. How in a relationship that we needed to heal what or how to say that again?
Yeah, what I guess I wanted it as like a bridge to the past as opposed
Yes,
to a bridge to the future.
to the future. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and that might explain why a lot of us get, obviously, it all explains this. I used to think that, we are the way we are when we have blocks or we can't seem to move forward. It's 90% because of past lives. Now I believe it's 100%, pretty much. Whatever we brought forward is what's keeping us from moving forward. And so that can explain a lot why in relationships, in romantic relationships, and me included, where we are attracted to people that we needed that from our past
Yeah.
lives that we just keep on that wheel until we heal it in some way.
Yeah, I feel that way for sure. I definitely feel that the people that came into my life were people I chose or energies of people who were trying to connect me to this clearing, so to speak.
Clearing,
I think it was
yes.
important.
Okay.
I think it was important. It was important for me to have the contacts to bring this to my consciousness and heal.
Hmm.
And sometimes you say in your life, what am I accomplishing at this point in my life? And sometimes that's an important aspect of removing the karmic attachments that we experience, or the connection to people and things that no longer serve us, but we have to clear away. And
Right.
it's so interesting. All the people, like my grandmother's friends. My grandmother was a Russian woman after war, and all her friends, a lot of them were Holocaust survivors who she met in the DP camps, which
Mm.
were displaced persons camps after World War II. And so there was a feeling of when I was around the people as a child that I didn't want to associate with them. Not because I was better, but because there was a feeling, I guess, from those war years itself of
That,
like detaching from
yeah.
something that could have caused more problems. And it, you know, obviously the synchronicities of me finding this out and having this passion and understanding of history and also living in this present moment just brought everything to a head. And after I did that, I no longer have this, I guess having the clarity to understand it was what was important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Do you feel that past life work is super important? I feel like it's probably one of the most important things we can do for our soul growth. What do you feel?
Yeah, well, I think it's like a Tetris. It's like when we have that block that doesn't allow the soul to breathe and there's
Yeah.
no openness. Once we remove it, everything falls into place, sort of, and then you could actually really proceed on your soul's path. I think, I was being reminded, so to speak, of
Hmm.
what I needed to heal, as I said
Nice.
before. So
Yeah.
I think it's so important because we all have phobias, we all have interests that we don't understand the passions we have. Sometimes we suppress these passions because they don't fit in the present life, such as mine.
Right.
And then yet I had to go back and do that. So it did interfere with my the present moment, so to speak, but it also enhanced my life because it brought me up the path of healing and doing healing work and getting into the Akashic records and helping people find their past lives or remnants of different lives that people experience so as to understand the same patterns that exist over time. And that if we don't recognize them, we repeat them.
Yes. I'm so happy to hear this, Adam, because there's not a lot of practitioners that are doing this type of work. And you say the same things I say, what we don't heal, we repeat. And so that makes me so happy to hear this. It's amazing what we can
Yeah.
do, yeah, with this work. Did you feel a clarity as you were learning? Did you feel clarity in your life, or were you able to
Yeah.
be aware of how things?
I think
Mhm.
Well, I think the imposter syndrome takes place within us. In other words, do we really believe what we're
Mm,
hearing in terms of the Akashic? Are we really good enough to do that?
yeah.
Are we enough to receive this information? Are we enough to comprehend it and use it in a healthy way?
Hmm.
So I think it definitely helped me, and it definitely helps other people, because when I'm doing Akashic Record readings for people, I notice that the patterns that they have now, I can see patterns from images from other lives. And so when I see them in a certain dress or certain outfit or certain
Hmm.
scenery, and I repeat the pattern of what I see, and then they say, "Oh, that somebody else told me that," and also that's how they living now, unless it's brought to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would be living in that place of where I'd be stuck.
Right. Yeah. That's perfect. It's not a lot of people that I've talked to that actually have come across other people who remember them in another lifetime. At least, or not in my awareness, I've seen any. I'm sure there are some. I've seen shows on past lives, but personally, I did come across a gentleman on the other side of the country who we connected through remembering having similar memories of a past life. And I just started sharing my experience. And actually, I traveled out of body to his house during a retrieval. And he said, "That's my house." I didn't know where it was, but he said, that's my house. And then we realized that we were sharing a similar lifetime where we were brother and sister during the Civil War. And
Wow.
it was a yeah pretty traumatic life. But he brought through pieces of the lifetime that I didn't get, and I brought through pieces for him that he didn't get. And it sounds like a lot of that happened with you too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for myself, I can't say that I remember these people, but somehow or
Okay.
another they
Yeah.
remember me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've run into people who have remembered me, but I don't remember them in other lifetimes as well.
Oh.
So it's very interesting that people are
But
remembering me, but I'm not remembering them, or I don't recall. So it's very interesting. When people say it, I mean, I honestly say, no, I don't. Like, people will say, "Do you remember me?" And I'll say, "No, I don't." And what else would you say? The healing part of it is that's the most important part, because it rings true for me. It rings true to something that they don't know about me, and that they're accessing through their subconscious mind and connecting to my subconscious experience as well as theirs. So I think it's been a healing tool for me. I think a lot of times people don't have I would say, they're not open to the subject, or opening up their intuitive sense
mhm,
to the
mhm.
imagination that exists, and that imagination sends images to us.
Right.
That subconscious mind is sending us, interacting with us, and sending it. There's times where we're around people where we're uncomfortable or we're not, and sometimes their energy is something we're familiar with, even though we don't know them on this earthly plane. So I think that applies as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, if you believe in soul groups, there's so much that we're doing with people within our group, right? Our soul group,
Yeah.
where we have the way I see it is that we have an inner group, which would be people we're closest to, which can be someone we have the most challenges with, right? And then
Yes.
moving a little bit further out, further out. So it would make sense that we would travel in similar lifetimes, or in lifetimes where we would come in contact with each other, perhaps.
Well, I guess we need a reference point to actually interact with souls that can actually repeat back to us their experiences that we are familiar with, as I said before.
Right,
Otherwise, we'd be bouncing around with no feedback or no mirror. And I think
right.
without the mirror, we can't see ourselves. And so obviously, we've had these mirrored what do you call it, contacts before. And so I think that's somewhat of what the experience is. Otherwise, there'd be no validation for what we're feeling. But if
Yeah.
people are giving readings and people are telling you things that you already have said or know,
Hmm.
and then it's repeated, then there has to be some validation. People don't have to believe it,
Right.
but the person who's going through it needs it as a reference point for their own growth.
Sure. Were you, before you started remembering or getting information about this lifetime or any others, did you have any sense of did you believe in past lives, I guess I should say?
I don't know. I think as a child, I would say sensitive, highly sensitive, and I was very. My mother said to me, "You were born to the wrong parents." So, and when she said that, I wanted to, I kind of felt that way. But again, I felt as we choose our parents, I felt I chose my parents and they chose me, and I needed them as the pinball bumpers that bounce the ball around so the ball doesn't go down into the hole but keeps
Yeah.
being bounced around, so I find my own traction. So I honored them actually, and I said, no, you were the right parents for me. I mean, I said that now because
Yeah.
I learned that it was they were the friction, they were the sandpaper that shaped me to become motivated to become and learn about the things I do.
Mm,
Had I had the personality that was maybe complacent and didn't want to seek, and maybe I would have had assertive parents that would completely assertive parents that would have said they take charge, I don't have to do anything. But it was my journey to use them as my impetus, so I'm happy they had that. But as a child, I had a sense of, I guess, sensitivity towards people's feelings. I was more empathic. I'd sit at a table and know what people were feeling, and
hmm.
my parents, I knew what was going on without them speaking, and I would say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you thinking this? Not why you're thinking this, but why. I understood the motives before they were, what was happening,
Yeah.
and I was picking it apart, and I thought everybody could, and so nobody could, so I was looked upon as like a thorn in their back, and so they would say, well, yeah. So I had the sensitivity at that young age, and as I went through my teenage years, again, my sensitivity made me feel things other people were feeling, so it was overwhelming for me, especially going through
Yeah.
that energy of an adolescent, and then on top of it,
Sure.
having the energy of trying to fit in. When you see things as a teenager, we're awkward, so people are not really authentic. People are acting in ways that are not authentic, or they haven't found themselves yet, and I didn't find myself, but
Hmm.
I surely saw that in others, or I displaced it on others. And so the experience of adolescence made me hypersensitive to other people's authenticity. And it's something I couldn't deal with if a person wasn't authentic. And so I avoided that setting, and I played sports.
Hmm.
And so sports for me was an outlet of authenticity, because you either winning or losing, and you're giving an effort or you're not.
Right.
And there was no in between. There was no in between.
Right. Yeah. I think sports are really, I think they're needed. I mean, they're important. The idea of sports and the, mm, that camaraderie you have with your team, that type of thing too, and to have that dichotomy of, your opponent and trying,
Yeah,
working
well,
hard at I think it's good for life.
yeah, well, I was a phys ed teacher for 30 years. So as a phys ed teacher, it wasn't to me so much about the skills that I was teaching the children, because children want to play and have fun no matter who they are. And
Yeah,
if somebody doesn't know something, they're not going to really want to be taught I shouldn't say they want to be taught. They really want to use exercise as an outlet for their energy.
sure.
And for me, teaching and sports was more about learning, as you said, camaraderie, but it was also more about learning how to find an outlet to relieve stress,
Hmm.
for a way of learning how to fight through adversity
Hmm.
in difficult times.
Yeah.
And so, like, I found physical education and sports a great motivation for me to overcome my own personal anxieties and stresses, and it gave me clarity to be able to do that. So I think that's an important aspect of for myself on an individual basis, how it served me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't play sports in school. I was too, I was too weird. My sister did though, but she ended up being a lot. I think she did a little bit, but anyway, she's more adjusted than I am. So I think it helps with, if you look at, I bet if there's some kind of there might be some type of study done on people that played sports in school compared to people maybe who didn't, or who were real shy or something like that. I was super, super shy. I wonder if the people who played sports, the kids who played sports, end up becoming more self-adjusted, more adjusted later on in life. What do you think about that? Or am I just saying something crazy? But
It could be. I mean,
yeah,
I think the if it's a one-on-one sport as opposed to a team sport, like if a person's a tennis player or a golf player, I
Hmm.
think that's a different mindset. A team player is a person has the ability to work with people and feel that camaraderie and
Yeah.
share moments with somebody else. And it's not easy to be in the company of other people, at different stages of our lives in order to be accepted or to be, how we're judged or not judged. So I think if we're able to, I think it teaches us to work together with people and to be able to overcome as a group mindset in terms of having, a buffer system of people relying upon you and you teaching or showing the way. So I think it definitely helps with adjustments in terms of workplace or life itself, adding more self-confidence,
Right.
perhaps.
Yeah. Self-confidence. That's huge. I believe that's huge. And especially in today's age, well, in all age, when you're trying to make it in the world from moving from a child or a teenager up into an adult, self-confidence is pretty important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but as we know, from my experience, I think those challenges of learning self-acceptance and overcoming the shameful thoughts of how we're treated or how we view ourselves
Yeah.
are also important of how to navigate ourselves through difficult waters and using life's experiences or setbacks as lessons as opposed to being victimized by them.
Right.
I mean, so many times we become victims of circumstances because we just are taught we're not given love, or we're not given conditional love. We're given unconditional love. I
Hmm.
mean, we're given conditional love as opposed to unconditional love. And in that case, what we wind up doing is we don't know how to generate it if we're not given that. And so we become victims of circumstances in order to get the attention and play the victim, which is a natural phenomenon as a young child. But then as we get older, we create the stories, the imagery of ourselves being victimized and think that somebody will notice that and take care of us. And we try to generate it for our own self-love, but it just lowers our energy field to a place where we diminish ourselves, I think. So I
Right.
think it's important for us to develop the self-love and learning from the lessons as opposed to diminishing ourselves with situations.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, and that brings thoughts of when we're in the victimhood, I guess you could call it, then we create more circumstances energetically to keep us in a victim space. And it's that that never ending until we get out of it and realize it feeding loop where one thing after another. I'm a victim, this is happening to me. Which is part of the part of the program, but also part of that spiritual, I believe it's that part of that spiritual and personal growth, right? The victimhood maybe
Yeah.
when we first get started.
Yeah, I also think we need a sound body and sound mind in combination. And what I mean by that is that if we don't have the energy, the physical energy to
Yeah.
overcome because we're exhausted or tired, then we get caught up in that cycle. And that's the only way we can get an adrenaline flow, by creating some type of drama in our lives that stimulates us to try to overcome and get out of the circle. And we can't get out of the circle when our energy is low, and that just keeps draining us. So we have to
Right.
just change the channel and do something physical
Right.
to become change the trajectory of where we're at or where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why on the emotional scale I feel that in this that emotional scale with shame and grief, shame, guilt, and grief
Yes.
are at the bottom, and that's what causes depression and all of that, which there's no movement, but anger is like a few above it. It's like at least with anger there's movement, you have movement in your energy, so that's a good thing to know.
Yeah. Well, I guess in shamanism, you're suppressing your fire, which causes
Hmm.
depression.
Yeah.
You're keeping it under wrap rather than
Depressed.
expressing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think when we express our fire in a healthy way without others being harmed by it,
Right.
without it being a brush fire, I
Yeah.
think then we're on the road to finding our power and finding who we are and taking charge of ourselves or helping others as well.